As you know, the IAEA has very substantial responsibilities in monitoring and verification of the agreement. We've now had 3 reports from the IAEA. They have all supported Iran's compliance with their obligations in the agreement. The IAEA has established what I would say are very, very professional relationships, both with the with Iran, with the E3EU+3, and actually, frankly, with the broader international community, especially that represented here by the Board of Governors of the IAEA. So we will continue to support the IAEA in their role, but they are doing an excellent job, and we are now 8 months, roughly speaking, into what will be a multi-decadal commitment, but so far the IAEA is doing a very, very good job. On nuclear and the low-carbon economy, clearly a very big deal, obviously, since last year is the Paris Agreement, but even more recently, last week, you saw in New York that 60 countries had joined, which is beyond the threshold for coming into force. We are not at that threshold yet for carbon emissions. We need 55% of the world's carbon emissions represented by the countries that have joined. We're at about 48% right now, but we keep pushing hard. The president keeps pushing hard, and we are optimistic about reaching that threshold this year as well, meaning that the agreement would come into force. And this will just maintain and, in fact, increase the pace of the low-carbon transformation. I will just mention that in Paris, in addition to the Paris Agreement, on the first day of COP21, there was also a very important agreement called Mission Innovation. President Obama and leaders of 19 other countries announced it. It's complemented now by the EU, and the idea is that these countries collectively invest now about $15 billion into energy technology innovation. The commitment is to double that to $30 billion over a 5-year period. In the United States, this agenda has received very good bipartisan support, and we will make some progress. I fully expect in the next year's budget. That process is not yet completed, but of course, over the 5-year period, we have to translate that bipartisan support into an additional roughly $5 billion of energy technology R&D at DOE. And what I want to say is that we have, at the same time, launched a greater emphasis on innovation in nuclear energy specifically, and so as part of the mission innovation budget increase, I would see a substantial commitment as well to nuclear energy innovation. And I think with that, we'll just open it up.
Great. So if you could please, when you ask your question, say your outlet and your name.
George John, Associated Press. Mr. Secretary, what do you say to allegations by Iran that there's foot dragging on financial sanctions?
Well, first of all, I'm going to primarily leave that to my State and Treasury colleagues. But let me say that the United States has done all that was asked of us in that dimension and more. But the reality is, and this is the JCPOA, the reality is that this was an agreement in its nuclear dimensions focused exclusively on the issue of a peaceful nuclear energy program. The flip side of that is that the sanctions relieved were specifically the nuclear sanctions, and that's been done. But I do remind you that there are other sanctions on Iran. It was very explicit that lifting those sanctions was not part of the deal. Lifting sanctions on missiles was not part of the deal. And we know that they continue to, in contravention of the UN resolutions, they continue to do that. There are other issues as well. So I was going to make clear, we've carried out fully our responsibilities. We've gone beyond the letter of the agreement, but the international banking system, the international business enterprises are going to have to not only have clarity on where the lines are drawn on the sanctions, but I think they're going to have more business confidence, if you like, which is obviously taking more time than Iran would like to see. But that's the ground truth.
Jonathan Tyrone with Bloomberg News. Mr. Secretary, hardly a week goes by without new records being set by renewable energy developers in terms of driving solar and wind energy down to record lows. So can you please define a little bit more where you see nuclear fitting into the energy mix, maybe in terms of baseload capacity on the grid, or going forward, how much of a percentage can you expect in a place like the U.S.?
Well, first of all, let me make very clear, at least certainly my view, and I believe it's clearly correct and true, that there's no one low-carbon solution that's going to be everywhere. I mean, we're going to have different low-carbon solutions in different countries. We're going to have different low-carbon solutions in different parts of the United States in terms of the mix of low and no-carbon sources. In that context, we remain committed to our all-of-the-above approach, which means, certainly the Department of Energy, we work across the innovation chain to make all options, nuclear being one of them, available to the marketplace to introduce. And especially as we get to deep decarbonization, let's say in the mid-century kind of time frame, we're going to need a lot of zero carbon energy, specifically electricity sources. So that's where, of course, where nuclear comes in. Now, in the grid, I can't predict what the market shares are going to be of different technologies. So, as you say, onshore wind and solar PV, for example, have had dramatic cost reductions, and they are enjoying rather significant increases in their rate of deployment. On the other hand, we also know that they are variable sources, maybe very inexpensive storage, utility scale storage will come into play. Maybe it won't. Maybe IT and control systems, etc., will dramatically improve the integration of those variable sources at large scale. We know nuclear is a high baseload option. That's been demonstrated by far the highest capacity factor of any technology. The question is going to be how much is baseload valued in the low carbon system? And I say right now what's critical is that we maintain the option for it to be a major contributor. So that's one point. So another point is that we are right now working, we're quite far along, into the second installment of what's termed the Quadrennial Energy Review. And this is focused on electricity system end to end. One of its major focuses is going to be on the valuation of services in the electricity system. So what is the valuation of baseload? What is the valuation of fuel diversity? What is the valuation of storage, of capacity factors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a key issue. Frankly, it's a key issue today in the context of continued operation of existing nuclear power plants. It'll be a key issue in terms of a different structure of the electricity system 2-3 decades down the road.
Channel Bar from NHK. One question regarding the Japanese situation. The Japanese government has announced that it is reviewing its project of this experiment fast breeder reactor Monju. What is the United States stance in the fact that Japan has an ample amount of plutonium and nuclear materials in the context of nuclear security? And what do you anticipate, what kind of debate do you anticipate in the general conference regarding this issue?
Well, I think first of all, as you said, Japan has announced a several-month review of fast reactors. We spoke with the Japanese delegation here, and they fully anticipate by the end of this year having results of this commission, which will consider the Manju question among others. Right? The assurances remain of no change fundamentally in the policy in terms of